Dick and Susan Shane, first cousins to the funeral home Shanes. Margaret and Stanley Moles, formerly of Newport, Rhode Island, and now of Mid-City, both attorneys. Crystal and Mark Mathern, pet store owners down from Lakeview for the evening. James Lee and his partner Zachary, antique and collectibles dealers from a shop on Royal Street in the Quarter, much more favorably treated than Mr. Taylor. Tim Tucker, the Mid-City plumber who assists with Carol's renovations, formerly of Lake Charles and now of 3668 St. Philip, and countless more whose names were quickly spoken, never completely registered, and henceforth immediately forgotten. In part, Carol's responsibility. She was distracted, and by the time we got to the kitchen, she'd even skipped a few people. Out on the deck, she made the introductions in the quicker, more efficient one-way manner. "Everyone, this is Michael. Make him feel at home." She pointed out Bob from Whole Foods and his girlfriend Takwa, and Zoran and Gwen from St. Peter Street, who lived 2 houses up from Phyllis. I kept a running inventory, which I referred to when the walk and talk was completed. No single women introduced, except one. Not really introduced either. Standing in the yard next to the stairs, late 20s at the most, her boyfriend, a guy with a thick silver bracelet at the keg filling cups. After speaking with a bearded black man in the backyard, who was on his way out, the beguiling young woman came up the porch steps, then looked across the deck toward the keg barrel, but didn't go up. She had on a black spaghetti strap thing and dirty broken-in cross-trainers, and seemed possibly bored with her companion, who made a quick, familiar, vaguely callous gesture to her while getting in the beer line. He had run up the steps ahead of her. Carol patted me on the back and went inside, and I wondered whether she noticed who caught my eye. If the woman was single, or unhappy with her unremarkable boyfriend, Carol might have mentioned it. If she was married and blissed out by her marriage, Carol still might have mentioned it. The fact that Carol hadn't mentioned her meant something. There is meaning in everything. She didn't know her, or she just wanted to go back inside. You have a decent-sized party, and you're not going to know or care about everyone. At the keg, the guy with the silver bracelet was still waiting his turn. His 2 cups were plain to see, so I stepped over and joked proactively how we were always doing the dirty work for our girlfriends. No response from him. Just a look. I laughed it off like I was happy to amuse myself and waited my turn patiently, looking around the porch. The woman smiled just as her date brushed by with the 2 full beers. He rejoined her at the top of the steps, then moved her toward the citronella candle next to them. Suddenly she was happy, with beer in hand. Inside, Phyllis and Carol were standing in the kitchen with James Lee and Zachary, the antique dealers. Tony, no doubt the future man of the hour, was in the living room soaking up compliments from the mayor on his outstanding choice of automobile. "Want to drive it?" Tony asked the mayor with a serious look in his face. "Hell yeah," said the mayor. "Let's have a look." "Hey, Carol," Tony called to her. "We're heading outside for a few minutes." Then Tony stepped over to Carol and his voice dropped. He added quietly, "Let me know when you're ready." Carol looked at him and then glanced at the clock on the wall. She turned back, shrugged, and smiled. She whispered to him, "No time like the present, I guess," then turned to address the room. Tony turned and stood behind her. "Hello, everyone. Friends. Can I have your attention for a minute?" The crowd hushed, murmured, and then hushed again. "The time has come to share my big news. My exciting announcement. The one I know you've all been waiting for. And hopefully, when I tell you, you'll be as happy and surprised as I was." The room had gone silent, though a few more murmurs at the pause. A few weeks ago, after Tony and I got back from dinner over at Lola's, just then someone in the crowd started to hum the "Here Comes the Bride" theme. Phyllis moved out of the kitchen to join the majority of the guests in the dining living room area. She smiled over at Tony and then back to the other guests, The whole room waited for Carol to get the words out. "And I did a test," continued Carol. "A test?" "3 days later I saw my doctor, and now it's official. If we're lucky, I'm very happy to announce, next year there's going to be a little baby at this party." Phyllis dropped her wine glass and shrieked. The crowd was silent for a moment, but then responded appropriately with lots of smiles, "Oh wows," and "Oh that's wonderfuls." Arguably not as stunned as Phyllis. Maybe not what they would have guessed first, but they had come expecting to hear a big announcement, and this definitely qualified. A faceless stranger toward the back called out, "I knew it!" "What?" screamed Phyllis, collecting herself just enough to use words, acting as surprised as she might have been to suddenly learn that she herself was pregnant. "It's true," said Carol, smiling. Carol was smiling, it seemed to me at the moment, like a brave woman facing a mysterious health condition, if not quite an illness. Her friends wouldn't approve. Maybe she was too old. They would worry, and she projected some of this worry, as if to assure them she would take all the necessary precautions. "That's wonderful. Congratulations are in order for you two kids," said a heavy, warm voice from the middle. The crowd pushed forward to hug and congratulate. Tony was then by her side, and the amassing FOCs shook Tony's hand and said wow, and told both of them how great it was. The men at the party no doubt believed it was more than fun. It was impressive. A lesson for me, that everyone knew immediately and without question that Tony was the kid's father, and that this was fine. The women were possibly a bit jealous. There seemed to be a few moms at the party. Many of the women had thinly veiled perplexity on their faces while they smiled and congratulated the mother-to-be. This is what love looks like, many may have thought as they approached Carol, by then fully relaxed and beaming. Phyllis was the first one there and scolded Carol emphatically for not telling her sooner. Then she settled and stepped to the side to make room for others, though still pestering Carol in between well-wishers. "So are you two finally going to get hitched or what?" Phyllis asked both of them, but more to Carol. Tony was shaking someone's hand and talking. Carol shrugged with her hands in the air, still smiling, and said she didn't know. They hadn't talked about it. "What do you mean you haven't talked about it?" "He's still afraid to ask me again," Carol said softly to Phyllis. "Who knows?" She then exclaimed, like it didn't matter enough at the moment to dwell on. "You're a couple of crazy kids, you two," said Phyllis, shaking her head. Phyllis stepped back to the counter where I was, turned and leaned back to watch. She was frowning, deep in thought, still in a semi-stunned mode. "Well, what do you know?" I said to Phyllis, leaning back next to her. "She's a dark horse, that Carol, I'll tell you that." "You think they were trying?" I asked Phyllis next, genuinely curious and not imagining that there really had been. "No way," Phyllis answered quickly, with whatever small feeling of betrayal she had washing away into a grin and bemused head shaking. "But then again, who knows? I mean, what the hell do I know? Maybe that's why she's been so tense these past couple of months." "She's been tense?" I asked, surprised. "You haven't noticed?" Phyllis asked, turning to make eye contact. I thought back. How would I have noticed? A couple of months ago, I didn't know Carol. "Well, sure," I told Phyllis, lying. "I guess she has seemed a little preoccupied." "You must have noticed," Phyllis decided for me. "You've sure spent enough time with her." "Have I? Had I?" "A couple of days here and there was all I remember." Phyllis ignored the comment and changed her position. She pushed off from the counter with a small thrust of her pelvis and stood erect, still watching Carol. She was quiet for a moment and then turned again. "Let's get some food, Michael." Phyllis pulled on my hand and led me into the living room. There were hors d'oeuvres on 2 side tables and 4 or 5 open bottles of wine. But the hors d'oeuvres were all pilfered, not to mention light fare to begin with. "Scraps," said Phyllis. "How about outside?" I suggested. "There's crawfish out there, and a keg." Yes, said Phyllis. Let's go get drunk.